Hello everybody, a very warm welcome to Pax Christi International's UN Meet and Greet event. I'm Alice Koy, I'm the advocacy officer of the Peace Movement. And before we continue, I would like to make a practical announcement. So when the presentations are in French, you can actually use English translation. And you will have to click on the interpretation sign at the bottom of the Zoom page. If you experience any technical issues, please let my colleague Beth Begley know in the chat. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais faire une annonce pratique. Quand les présentations sont en anglais, vous les notez que nous avons de traduction en français, que vous pouvez activer en cliquant sur l'icône interprétation en bas de la page Zoom. Si vous rencontrez des problèmes techniques, veuillez en informer ma collègue Beth Begley dans le chat. So I'm very happy to let you know that today we have many participants from all across the world. So I say hello France, hello United Kingdom, hello United States, hello Rwanda, hello Palestine, Brazil, Peru. Let us know in the chat where you're from. We are delighted to hear from you. So what's actually the program of today? So we're going to first hear about Pax Christi International's advocacy work at the UN, 2 presentations of our UN representatives. And thereafter, there will also be some times for questions and answers. So what you can do through the event, in case you want to ask questions further on, is to put your name and organization in the chat. And some people will be giving the floor after the presentations. We really like it to be a dialogue. So feel free and comfortable to ask questions because we're really here among Pax Christi friends. So now let us continue with a presentation of Mary Yelanek, Pax Christi International main representative at the UN in New York and also our board member. It's really my pleasure to give her the floor, and she will give a presentation about our advocacy work. Mary, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Alice. Hello, everyone, and welcome to all of you. My name is Mary Yelanek, and I am the main representative of Pax Christi International to the United Nations in New York. I am also a board member of Pax Christi International. I've worked for Pax Christi at the United Nations since 2016. My own principal areas of focus at the United Nations in New York include 2 things. First, nuclear abolition. And in that capacity, I've worked closely with other UN representatives who are present at this event today and helped contribute to the work of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, on the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And my second area of focus is peace building and nonviolence. Advocacy at the United Nations, and again, the United Nations being the only forum in the world in which 193 nations of the world regularly and peacefully assemble together, is a core component of Pax Christi's work and mission. Pax Christi International has 11 representatives working at the UN globally, including at the UN in Vienna, New York, Geneva, and UNESCO in Paris. Pax Christi International is an NGO. It's an acronym which simply means non-governmental organization in English. Organizations formed by citizens rather than by governments. NGOs play a critical role at the United Nations in educating state members about the reality of people's experiences around the world and in advocating for the adoption of policies to redress inequities, reduce suffering, and promote the common good. As UN representatives, we focus our work on Pax Christi International's overall advocacy priority of nonviolence and peace building, as well as on 3 other more specific advocacy priorities: nuclear weapons, extractivism, and Israel-Palestine. These priorities, which are decided upon by the Pax Christi International Board with input from Pax Christi members, involve specific areas of human activity that entail deep historic and recurring violence. Our purpose as members of the Pax Christi International Representatives team at the United Nations in cities around the world is to learn, to understand, and to influence the policies of UN member states in order to advance the understanding and practice of global nonviolence. And what does this advocacy look like? Well, it includes representing Pax Christi International at meetings and conferences and reporting on those. It involves meeting with ambassadors and their staffs, both in their missions and in general meetings at the United Nations. It involves actively participating in formal and informal working groups of NGOs, including faith-based NGOs. It means working with other NGOs on projects, developing and delivering statements, and hosting meetings. It means lobbying national missions with respect to particular issues. It entails hosting side events at the United Nations, featuring panels on specific topics. It also includes hand delivering to national representatives letters from Pax Christi International members and global partners. And it means meeting with members of Pax Christi International from around the world. It means meeting with you when you visit us in our UN cities. Pax Christi International's advocacy work at the United Nations level is, as much as possible, member and partner based. Our goal is to solicit from you, our members and partners, information that would help us in our advocacy, to inform you, our members and partners, about advocacy opportunities, and to consult and involve you, our members and our partners, in joint actions regarding your countries and issues that you are working on. Thank you so much for being here today and for all that you do to advance peace and nonviolence.
Thank you very much, Marie, for this great introduction. And so you as a participant now got to know Marie virtually, but now it's also time to get to know the other UN representatives as well. So I'm going to firstly give the floor to Ghislain Leray, who's joining us from Paris.
Bonjour à tous, ici Ghislain Leray. Je me présente rapidement. Je suis membre de Pax Christi France. Je salue Alfonso Zardi qui est tout à l'heure. Je suis représentant de Pax Christi International à l'UNESCO depuis 2017. Donc, je suis motivé par les questions de dialogue entre les religions, d'œcuménisme et fondamentalement par l'objectif de construire la paix par un développement juste et équilibré par rapport à l'environnement. Je travaille actuellement, pour vous dire un petit peu mes centres d'intérêt récents, à la réalisation d'un site internet intitulé Les signes des temps, où j'expose mon livre qui s'intitule Le grand retournement, par rapport à l'idée d'un renouveau qui pourrait surgir, et avec un forum sur les signes des temps auquel j'invite les membres de Pax Christi à venir s'exprimer quand il sera utilisé. Voilà.
Merci, Ghislain. So now it's Jonathan Fredericks, his turn. He's joining us from France.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour. I'm calling from near Geneva in France. And my background is in communications and development work and advocacy. And with Pax Christi, being in Geneva means a lot because the UN in Geneva is sort of the human face. Think about World Health Organization. Think about the Labor Office. Think about human rights. And of course, also much to do with disarmament. Many treaties have to be signed and agreed finally in New York at the General Assembly, but they're usually negotiated here in Geneva. So it's a great place to work on peace. and it likes to think of itself as a city of peace. It's a privilege to be with you because you remind us here of exactly what we see at the UN, that God is blessed by a whole family of people who come from all parts of the world and work together for things that matter to everyone. And you represent that, which I think is part of the heart of Pax Christi. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. So Abigail Metzger is next.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am the representative for Pax Christi at the UN on the NGO working group for Israel-Palestine. As a representative, when I returned from my first trip to Palestine, Israel in 2013, I was fortunate to go back for Pax Christi's 70th anniversary, which was held in Bethlehem. This is definitely a passion for me, and I so enjoy representing Pax Christi at the UN on behalf of seeking a just and sustainable peace for everyone in the Holy Land. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. And now our newly UN representative since January, Michel Cala, who's joining us from France.
Yes, hello everybody, bonjour tout le monde. I joined Pax Christi in January at the request of Ghislain. I'm here to help Pax Christi and to help Ghislain in their task. So I am the last person who entered the Pax Christi in this meeting. So I'm here to listen and to learn from you, and to learn a lot. I hope to be the most efficient possible in my mission for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Michel. And we're really happy you joined the UNESCO team in Paris. So now we will continue with a person who actually has a long time experience with our movement and also in working at the UN, Mary Dennis.
Hello, it's wonderful to be with all of you today. I am happy to be on the UN team right now. I'm based in Washington, D.C., but I'm a member of the team in New York. My main area of focus is nonviolence, trying to understand how policymakers can support nonviolent options in specific ways, and how nonviolence is in many ways a cross-cutting approach and a framework for all of the issues in which Pax Christi is engaged. Much of my specific advocacy right now has been with the Vatican. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. And another person who has been for a long time with us and has done really good work for us is Beth Begley. She's joining us from New York.
Hi, I'm really glad to be here with you too, and I'm delighted that we have this opportunity to speak. Beth Begley, located in New York, been representing Pax Christi at the UN since about 2004. And my main issue has been disarmament, both conventional and nuclear. And I also keep track of registrations and documentation and credentials at the UN in New York. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Beth. So next is Elisabeth Jungmeyer. She's joining us from Austria. You might have to unmute yourself.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Elisabeth Jungmeyer from Austria, located in Linz, near Vienna. I'm a member of the Nuclear Weapons Ban Working Group from Pax Christi International and main representative of Pax Christi International to the United Nations in Vienna. Our NGO Committee on Peace had last week an online discussion meeting on nuclear weapons. What now? The situation after the entry into force of the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Our speaker was Mr. Reynoldner, Physicians Against Nuclear Weapons, and Mr. Narada, from a member of the Earth Society Foundation, an observer, and our diplomats from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are very active in this case. Yes, that's all.
Thank you very much. So now we will go back to Mary Yelanek because she will introduce Doug Husseter, who's also in New York, who's not able to join us today.
Yes, Doug sends his regrets. Some of you know Doug. Doug joined our Pax Christi team in New York several years ago, having previously worked at the United Nations NGO in another capacity in that community for many years. He works to promote dialogue and peace building among people of the world. His primary interest lies in nonviolent alternatives to war, and he has a very interesting personal history there. Doug participates in advocacy at the United Nations in New York, including, among other things, through the NGO Working Group on the Security Council. And many of you may know Doug because he was a speaker at last year's Pax Christi International Asia Pacific webinar. And Doug sends his best to all.
Thank you, Mary. So I see that some French speakers are joining us in the chat. Welcome, Pascal, Eric, Jean-Jacques. I see a message that there was a problem with the French translation. Is it all solved now?
Yes, Pascal told me he's now connected.
Okay, I just want to double check before continuing. So now you met our amazing team of UN representatives. And we're going to actually hear from a national Pax Christi member who met some of them at the UN in New York. So we're going to hear a video testimony from Bianca Pato-Boy, and she's a member of Pax Christi Philippines, and she's been to a sustainable development meeting in 2019 at the UN in New York.
I am Bianca Pato-Boy, Women, Peace and Security Officer at the Center for Peace Education, CPE, Miriam College, a member of Pax Christi Philippines. In July 2019, I had the wonderful opportunity of sharing CPE's current Women, Peace, Security project, We Peace, at the Voices of SDG 16+, Stories of Global Action, a side event organized during the high-level political forum at the UN in New York. The event was co-organized by several civil society organizations, including Pax Christi International. So a little bit about peace. The Women's Agency in Keeping the Peace, Promoting Security, or We Peace, is a localization initiative of the Philippines National Action Plan on UNSCR 1325 to capacitate selected community women in the Philippines on gender-responsive peacemaking and peacekeeping. In 2019, We Peace has helped form women peacekeeping teams and enabled women's increased participation in existing peacekeeping mechanisms. Our women peacekeepers are from 4 different areas in the country facing different conflict lines such as tribal wars, clan wars, internal displacement, and development aggression. The Voices of SDG 16+, Stories of Global Action, is a collaborative campaign aiming to bring the work of civil society on SDG 16+ to the global level of discussions at the United Nations. Individuals and partners of the organizations taking part in the 2019 event from around the world had the opportunity to submit short videos telling their stories of the best practices and extraordinary efforts being undertaken towards SDG 16+ at the national and local levels. Through Pax Christi International, we were informed about this important opportunity. Some organizations submitting a video would be selected to present their work at the UN in New York, which was luckily our case. At the time of video submission, We Peace already completed our capacity training program. We really wanted to focus on the many experiences we have gathered from years of work on WPS and CPE. It was a good opportunity to take stock and see how far we have come and how far we can still go as a center for our work with the WPS localization in the Philippines. WPS was actually born out of the outcomes of an action research on the barometer of women's security. The research put forward that peace in the community will be more sustainable if local women were meaningfully involved. Women recommended that capacities of local women for peace work and participation be strengthened so that they can take on the role of peace and security monitors and conflict solvers in their own communities. Peace has not always been a walk in the park for us in the country. There have been peaks, for example, with the Philippines having the first woman negotiator in the world to sign a peace agreement. And there have also been setbacks with the current very militarized approach to peace in the country right now. Speaking at the UN in New York was a good opportunity for me to showcase and remind decision and policymakers that these documents and agreements, when implemented and supported properly, really do open spaces of meaningful and inclusive participation on the ground. To be a young woman peace builder, being in the UN, meeting other peace builders who were also young, was personally one of the most important learning opportunities for me. I got to learn how youth, women, and so many more aspects of peace are interconnected, lived, and advocated for around the world. My participation has enabled me to attend and engage in even more dialogues and global events on SDG 16+, the 2030 Agenda, and the WPS Agenda. And even being moderator for the Voices of SDG 16+ event in 2020. So I'm very grateful to Pax Christi International UN's representatives in New York, in particular Mary Yelanek, Husseter, and Beth Begley, for readily assisting me and my colleague Sophia, who was also there to present her own work on youth, peace, and security in 2019. We flew to New York knowing we were going to get taken care of and that we had mentors and colleagues whom we may have met for the first time there, but was like meeting longtime friends and kindred spirits. Now, in the time of COVID, a lot of the work has slowed and shifted online. We remain active internationally through our work with our partners like Pax Christi Asia Pacific and Pax Christi International, as what we've done in October for the Tour of Asia Pacific, where we organized an online forum with the Filipino women peace builders, sharing their participation in peace, and my own interview for Pax Christi International for its video series featuring young members of the movement. In a time of shrinking civil society space, the Voices of SDG 16+, meeting members of Pax Christi International in New York, and continuing our work with Pax Christi International remains to be a good reminder of the good and hardworking people and allies that remain steadfast and empowered in committing to working for a peaceful world. Thank you and keep safe.
So that was truly a beautiful video testimony from Bianca. And it really shows also very nicely how in the Pax Christi movement, different generations work together and they learn from each other and together they strive for peace. So really nice. So you can put your reactions in the chat to this video if you would like. And may I also remind you, before we go to the next presentations, that if you have any questions regarding the presentations and the people speaking and presenting themselves, that you can put your name and your organization in the chat. And my dear colleagues will collect your names and organizations and then pass me the information so I can later on give some people the floor. So now let us continue with the presentation of Jonathan Frederick on our nuclear weapons ban treaty work. I know several of you are very interested in this presentation. So Jonathan, you have the screen.
Thank you, Alice, and it's great to be here. I'm going to do this with a PowerPoint, so I'm going to disappear and speak to you on top of the pictures. Could we start the PowerPoint, Beth? Okay, the title of the talk is Advocating the Treaty. Now back to the first, advocating the treaty that bans nuclear weapons. This is a brand new treaty. It's only about 6 weeks old. Next slide, please. Change the slide, please, Beth. Here we are with the main thing to get in mind. This is a humanitarian disarmament treaty. You're looking at the Geneva headquarters of the United Nations, and you're looking at a broken chair, which was put up for the very first humanitarian disarmament treaty, the treaty to ban landmines. And it's a chair with one leg missing, put up by Handicap International. It's been there now for quite a long time. Next slide. The sign on the side lists these treaties, which are made for humanitarian reasons, primarily with that rationale: landmines, cluster munitions, chemical weapons, biological weapons. And this picture is taken from an action we did in 2013 during the Non-Proliferation Treaty meeting, when things really started to move. The TPNW is the nuclear ban treaty, and it builds on the bans of these other weapons that all violate international humanitarian law. It's virtually impossible to use them in ways that respect the laws of war. The treaty addresses the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. Next. In English, we say nukes because nuclear weapons is so long. So nukes are so destructive, they end life as we know it. And what comes to your mind when you see a picture like that? For me, it's the desecration of everything that God has made. Next. A key term with nuclear weapons is mutually assured destruction. If you kill me, I will kill you. If you destroy my country, I'll destroy your country, the nuclear powers say to each other. What could be a bigger opposite of the things that Pax Christi stands for? Active nonviolence, peace building, and the whole concept of integral human development. What could be farther away from that? What antithesis? Next, please. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the TPNW, is a historic ban that entered into force, as I said, about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 22nd of January, 2021. It's binding international law already for the states that are party, 54 so far, with 34 other states signed, and they can now ratify. The treaty codifies norms and actions that are needed to free the world of nuclear weapons. The impact of the treaty starts now. What with? With the membership. As the membership grows, the influence grows. With promotion of the treaty, explaining what it does and why we need it. It's a long curve of learning and of pressure. And then starting to put it to use. It actually has parts that can already be used. Next. Next slide. To understand a little bit of the approach we take, which you'll hear about in the remaining minutes of this short talk, I want to introduce the idea of a power map. The power map for banning nukes looks a bit like this. And the thing to keep in mind is that the majority matters. The majority matters. So 9 states have nuclear weapons, the tiniest group on the board here. 30 states, 30 countries rely on the US's nuclear weapons. And then we get into the green color. 88 states have already signed and ratified the TPNW. 115 countries are in nuclear weapon-free zones. And the biggest of all these zones is Africa, which with other zones takes the whole southern hemisphere out of the grip of the nuclear powers, still at their mercy, but out of their grip in legal terms. 132 countries helped to negotiate this new ban treaty, the TPNW. 155 countries don't even rely on nuclear weapons. 159 agree with the statements that nukes should never be used again under any circumstances. And then 187 do not have nukes. It's the 9 up the top and the 187, you get the number of countries in the world. Next, please. The heart of the strategy from this presentation and the way Pax Christi work can be simplified to moving those numbers. The same numbers you saw on the last slide are on the left-hand side, and on the right in this list of points are ways that we move them. So those 9 people at the top, the 9 countries at the top, they deserve to hear from morning till night how illegitimate, how stigmatizing nuclear weapons are because of international humanitarian law, human rights law, and common sense, if you like, and key tenets of faith. Second way, help to secure more signatures and ratifications for the ban. Third, encourage parish education about the ban treaty, things that are part of our strategy. Invite bishops to support the ban treaty. Request bishops' conferences to call their governments to join the treaty. Publicize and apply the papal critiques of nuclear weapons. Lobby diplomats from states that rely on nuclear weapons. Inform and invite treaty support from nuclear-free governments. And remember, there's 187 of those. Participate and coordinate with the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, ICAN, which Pax Christi is a member. Next, please. Some of the activities, you've heard a little bit about it already. Here's 4 examples. Social media campaigns. You just saw Mary Yelanek. Here she is holding up a letter about to be delivered to somebody on the Security Council, I think. Letters to, and going to meetings with church officials and government officials. In the lower left-hand side, we just had a video from Philippines. Here's a Philippine partner with reading an interfaith statement on behalf of all the interfaith organizations. And then on the right-hand side, side events, where you take a special time together at lunchtime at a UN conference, and you go into depth and you interact with other NGOs and with diplomats. Next, please. Want to summarize some of the results of working in this way. So the treaty was adopted in 2017. It reflects what Pax Christi and many other groups had been advocating for years. In 2017, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to the whole campaign, which includes Pax Christi. And then Pax Christi members in Africa and Latin America, some of them new to disarmament, nuclear disarmament, asked their governments to sign the treaty, and those governments signed the treaty. Conferences of Catholic bishops, CCBs, of Canada and Japan, call on their governments to join the nuclear ban. We urge other CCBs and bishops to follow that lead. And then in support of the TPNW, the Pope condemns the possession of nuclear weapons as well as their use. It's a key point for the church to take this position very clearly after the Cold War, in which we and others have promoted in the church and with governments. Can you rotate it down? There might be another point, or switch to the next page. Go to the next slide, please. 4 more items. We and others suggest that when the Pope is going to Japan 2 years ago, that it'd be great to talk about the treaty. It'd be great to meet the Hibakusha. It's hard to say how that exactly happened, but it happened. Our Hiroshima Nagasaki video for last summer, when the bombings were 75 years old, has been translated into 8 languages and viewed thousands of times. A short video about the real cost of nuclear weapons. And then at national and regional levels, Pax Christi and its members invite public statements by bishops on this actually entry into force of the treaty, which we're just going through now. And then finally, creating positive momentum via social and Catholic media for the 50 ratifications and the entry into force. Next slide, please. What's coming up in the future as we go forward now with the treaty in force? Lobbying countries that rely on nuclear weapons, nuclear reliant governments in the global north, they all are almost, about their legal status. Urge them to attend the ban treaty meetings as observers. They haven't signed the treaty, but they're welcome to come as observers. There's no secret here. The whole world is completely honest about what's needed to be done. Advocate for other positive engagement by nuclear sharing states, those countries involved with nuclear weapons. Use the treaty to promote church-related divestment from nuclear weapons producers and banks. Very important step. No good investor, no decent bank wants to invest in something that's illegal. And there's been progress already. We need to build on it. Partner with members in nuclear-free countries of the global south to lobby for more treaty signings and ratifications. 132 states are basically in favor of the treaty. 155 have no reason not to sign it, even 159. I would say you could push this up into the high 170s and 80s. And that means each of you, and I want to come to your countries in a minute here, and finally promote TPNW's humanitarian obligations. It's got things in it that all disarmament treaties should have. It's breaking new ground with victim assistance and environmental remediation. Clean up the mess you make when you use these horrible weapons. Next, please. Three more examples. And on the left, you see the famous building in Nagasaki, and you see the lanterns that people float on the river at the memorial each year on August 6th. And our work is a little bit like each one of us being one of those lanterns, and we're floating on this river of peace right past the city where the bomb was used. So we'll continue to take part in ICANN, in something called the Humanitarian Disarmament Forum. As you all know, and we all know, in every language, Union fait la force. We will link TPNW's impact to climate change. Could you go back to the last slide for 2 seconds, please? Okay, we'll stay here. Oh, there it is. So climate change, military cuts, human security, and then keep reaching out to church leaders to call on their governments to join the TPNW and take other peace-building steps, supporting the papal leadership on this issue. So 2 more slides. Let's have the next one. It's a picture of the board, the voting board at the United Nations, when they took the key step to form the group that would recommend that we start ban negotiations, this historic step, which in 75 years of having this devilish weapon plaguing the earth had never been taken. And the green countries were voting yes. There's 133 of those. The red ones are the bad guys. They all voted no, but there's only 12 of those. So the nuclear powers and some of their minions. And then the yellows are very interesting, 33 yellows. So they're not quite sure if they're brave or if they're not brave. And so we take that vote, and then if you go to the next slide, and we'll show you the countries that are on this call and what color you are, what color your government is. So look at the power on the left-hand side there in the green column. DR Congo, I hope we have the right, I have the right Congo there. Kenya, South Sudan, Rwanda, Burundi, Togo, Liberia, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, Palestine, Austria. All green countries, they want the treaty. They all need to sign it. Some of them haven't done that yet, and they all need to ratify it. Some haven't done that yet. Who abstained from the 33? Only on the call today are people from Belgium and people from Canada. But abstinence is great because it means you've got only one foot in the water, you're not both. And then who votes against it? Of course, United Kingdom, United States, and France. So we'll give the last word to a very important person for nuclear disarmament, a peacemaker, and nothing better to end with than a quote from Fratelli Tutti: all people are different faces of the one humanity that God so loves. The true worth of countries is measured by their ability to think as part of the larger human family. I think there's hardly a better way to say why we are doing what we're doing to help the world to move towards peace and abolition of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for your great presentation. And it's really such an amazing result to have this treaty now. And it's thanks to this energetic civil society campaign, to which many Pax Christi members also contributed, next to the Pax Christi International, like, broader organization. But it's also really good to point out, as you also did in your presentation, that much work remains to be done. So hopefully some of the people on this call will get inspired to also ask their government to sign and ratify the treaty, and those who have already done so to start implementing the treaty. So now it's time for our next presentation by Abigail Metzger, who will tell you about our work on Israel and Palestine at the UN in New York. Abigail, the screen is yours.
Hello again. Unfortunately, I don't have such a wonderful slide presentation, but I hope you'll get a sense of the kind of work that we are doing at the UN on behalf of seeking peace in the Holy Land. As I said, I am the representative at the NGO Working Group on Israel-Palestine at the United Nations, and advocating for a just and sustainable peace that ensures the human rights and dignity of Palestinian and Israelis is one of Pax Christi International's 4 priorities. It may be asked why Pax Christi International specifically raised up the situation in Israel-Palestine. The ongoing asymmetrical conflict, which has existed between Israel and Palestine for more than 73 years, has resulted in a brutal military occupation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. There is a devastating absolute blockade of the air, land, and sea of the Gaza Strip, which is often referred to as the world's largest open-air prison. And for those Palestinians who live in Israel and hold Israeli citizenship, they unfortunately are second-class citizens. There are approximately 60 various Israeli laws that specifically discriminate against them. So it is a really dire situation, which has been going on for way too long. As Nora Kalami, a Pax Christi International board member and a Palestinian, has said, working for a just peace in Palestine, Israel is the tangible proof that we finally, quote, know the things which make for peace. Luke 19:42. Respect and equal rights for all people, end of racism and oppression, justice with compassion and nonviolence, and accountability of all parties, which will yield love that can restore the dignity of the human being. Pax Christi has a unique role and voice in the international community, and that is why it is so important that we are at the table as an active member of the NGO Working Group for Israel-Palestine. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the working group. And there are working groups at the UN that deal with almost every major issue, and Pax Christi has had a role in many of those. The working group, which consists of NGOs, as Mary said, are non-governmental organizations that are accredited by the Economic and Social Council of the UN. Our members include faith-based and secular groups and organizations. We also have guest members who include representatives from the United Nations, including UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, who has deals with Palestinian refugees across both Palestine and in other neighboring countries, and from a representative from the Committee for the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. The working group works very closely with the committee, supporting their activities by providing suggestions for programs, speakers, and other civil society organizations with expert subject matter who know what is going on around the world regarding this. We are also in ongoing communication with the Palestinian Mission. The working group, when appropriate, meets with member states, and we have collaborated on several events, including a high-level area meeting that dealt with Gaza. We are also fortunate to have off-the-cuff or off-the-record meetings with the Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the Occupied Palestinian Territories and other senior UN officials when they are or in New York. Getting firsthand information of what is actually happening on the ground through meetings with Palestinian and Israeli NGO representatives is another crucial aspect of our work, allowing us to disseminate accurate and timely information within our organizations and with our partners. There are few more important venues for discussion and advocacy regarding the situation in Israel-Palestine than at the United Nations. As an active member of the working group, we have an opportunity to both share Pax Christi's views and engage with NGOs and UN officials and member states and influence the cause of a just peace in the Holy Land. I would be delighted to share more information in detail about our work. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or would like to be notified about upcoming events at the UN, most of which are available live or on demand at webtv.un.org. And I have also put some links to recent statements by Pax Christi International regarding this issue. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this.
Thank you so much, Abigail. And I can really say that Abigail is really an expert on the matter. And it's not always easy to work on the Palestinian cause, but she really continues to do it with a lot of passion. So I really want to recognize that. Before I continue, I just want to make sure you can hear me well, because I had some messages that my volume was low.
We can hear you.
Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much. So as Abigail said, the UN representatives are very open to being in contact with you and having your questions and having a dialogue. That's also why we're organizing this event. So may I remind you that if you have any questions regarding the presentations, you can put your name and your organization in the chat. And then later on, you will possibly be given the floor. So now let us continue with a presentation by Ghislain Leray. He will talk about our work at UNESCO. This presentation will be in French. So if you need translation, please go down to the icon button at the bottom of the Zoom page and switch the translation on. So Ghislain, the floor is yours.
Oui. Next. Donc, présentation du Pax Christi international à l'UNESCO. Alors, donc, oui, la mission de l'UNESCO est de contribuer donc, à l'édification d'une culture de paix. On parle d'une culture dans les consciences, à l'éradication de la pauvreté, au développement durable et au dialogue interculturel par l'éducation, les sciences, la culture, la communication et l'information. Next. Sa directrice est Audrey Azoulay, son deuxième mandat. C'est une femme de culture. Elle a été ancienne ministre de la Culture sous le président de la République française, François Hollande. Donc, c'est son deuxième mandat. Next. Alors, pourquoi c'est important pour Pax Christi International d'être représenté à l'UNESCO? Donc, nous avons un statut consultatif auprès de l'UNESCO. Donc, on peut prendre la parole dans des réunions avec les États membres ou les délégués des États membres, donner des commentaires sur les documents politiques et promouvoir notre travail. J'y reviendrai par la suite. Donc, l'UNESCO a soutenu financièrement notre travail dans les régions du Sud, par exemple pour l'éducation des jeunes dans les Grands Lacs sur la communication digitale. On peut aussi travailler avec d'autres ONG, notamment avec d'autres ONG catholiques. Je pense notamment à New Humanity, qui est représenté ici par Chantal Brévin dans notre webinaire, ou avec le CCIC de Christine Roche. Alors, j'en viens au comité de liaison ONG UNESCO. Donc, le comité de liaison est élu tous les 2 ans. Il fait le lien entre les ONG et les instances dirigeantes de l'UNESCO. Et donc, son rôle est notamment de décider des journées internationales et des conférences en coopération avec des initiatives des ONG. Je reviendrai par la suite. Donc, son président actuellement, il vient d'être nommé David Grosso, qui est président du comité de liaison. Alors, quels sont mes engagements au sein de l'UNESCO comme représentant principal de Pax Christi International? Donc, mon premier travail a été de participer au groupe de travail des ONG sur les filles, les conditions des filles. Donc, ça a débouché sur l'envoi d'un questionnaire aux ONG qui était présent sur le terrain à travers le monde, sur la situation des filles en matière de santé, d'éducation, etc. À l'issue de ce questionnaire, un texte sollicitant l'action des États en faveur des filles a été envoyé à leurs ambassadeurs à l'UNESCO. Le groupe des filles prend désormais le nom de Voix des filles et cherche à porter les intérêts des filles dans le monde au sein de l'UNESCO. Il a été longtemps présidé par Martine Lévy. La suivante, s'il vous plaît. Alors, texte suivant. Ensuite, je me suis investi dans le groupe de travail sur la construction de la citoyenneté mondiale, la conférence préparant la construction de la citoyenneté mondiale, sous l'égide de notamment Chantal Grévin, donc de New Humanity. Donc, j'ai proposé avec d'autres que l'on parle des expériences de terrain des ONG qui iraient dans le sens de la construction de la citoyenneté mondiale. Et je proposais que soit retenu parmi ces expériences le travail réalisé par Pax Christi International dans la région des Grands Lacs en Afrique sur la formation à la non-violence. Donc, cette conférence devrait déboucher sur une conférence en Corée du Sud dans les années à venir. Next, please. Alors, autre action qui m'incombe, c'est la présence dans les conférences de l'UNESCO comme représentant du Pax Christi International. Donc, j'ai notamment été représentant dans une conférence organisée par les organisations juives où était présente la directrice Audrey Azoulay. Donc, j'ai eu un rapide échange à la fin avec la directrice. Je lui ai fait don de la plaquette de présentation de Pax Christi International. J'ai également participé à une conférence sur le réseau de prospectivistes organisé par l'UNESCO avec des chercheurs. J'ai également fait intervenir le député Dominique Potier. Donc, il est intervenu à ma demande dans une conférence pour présenter sa loi qui responsabilise les multinationales vis-à-vis de leurs filiales à l'étranger. C'est une loi qui a été votée en France et qui devrait être prise à l'échelon européen. On voit Dominique Potier en photo là, à l'Assemblée nationale. Donc, Dominique Potier, c'est un député qui a créé un laboratoire d'idées et de liens avec des associations esprit civique qui se fondent sur le christianisme social. Next, please. Ensuite, depuis la pandémie, donc, les réunions se sont un petit peu arrêtées. Donc, ça se traduit par des webinaires plutôt maintenant. Donc, j'ai notamment assisté à un dialogue entre ambassadeurs de l'UNESCO qui est très intéressant. Également un webinaire sur le travail d'une prospectiviste qui débouche sur des propositions en matière d'éducation vers la Commission européenne. Donc, et il y a d'autres webinaires qui sont régulièrement proposés actuellement. Next, please. En dernière partie, j'essaie de vous montrer comment j'essaie de mettre en valeur les actions de Pax Christi International à l'UNESCO. Donc, grâce au travail de Dieudonné de l'équipe de Bruxelles, on a pu mettre sur le blog du comité de liaison ONG UNESCO la présentation des actions de Pax Christi International dans la région des Grands Lacs sur l'éducation et la non-violence. Je suis également intervenu à la conférence internationale de l'UNESCO en 2017. Donc, j'ai commencé par introduire rapidement l'historique de Pax Christi International. J'ai rappelé la participation de Pax Christi aux négociations sur le traité d'abolition des armes nucléaires. Et enfin, j'ai fait un rappel que la culture peut et doit être un vecteur de paix. En 2020, c'est la co-représentante avec moi à l'époque de Pax Christi International qui est intervenue, Gaëlle Pasquier. Donc, elle est intervenue sur l'éducation à la non-violence. Gaëlle Pasquier s'est beaucoup plus investie dans le groupe de travail sur les migrations. Pour finir, je voulais souhaiter la bienvenue à Michel Cala, qui va donc remplacer Gaël Pasquet, qui a quitté l'équipe. Donc, il arrive dans une période de transition due à la pandémie, donc surtout marquée par les webinaires. Donc, Michel était d'origine libanaise. Il est donc sensibilisé aux questions de paix et il a une formation dans l'économie et cadre dans une banque. Voilà. Merci de votre attention à tous.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Ghislaine. It's really important, the work of UNESCO.
Merci.
I think also, especially now in this time of pandemic, you know, one of the core tasks they have is education. And yeah, new forms of education, especially virtually, are so important. So the work has become even more important, and it's important we can influence that. So now that we hear all these amazing presentations from the UN representatives, now actually we want to hear from the participants on this call. So please let us know if you would have any question or suggestion regarding the presentations on Pax Christi International's UN advocacy work, the specific topics that have been set out. This is really the moment for you to exchange with the UN representatives. I think there's a question. Somebody is raising its hands, but I cannot see it well. Yes, hello. Where you're from, who are you, where you're from, and what is your question?
Merci bien. Bonjour, c'est Pascal Akoti. Vous me recevez, s'il vous plaît?
Oui, très bien.
Merci bien. Pascal Akoti de l'association Sel et Lumière du Togo. Et je salue tous les participants à ce rendez-vous spécial de Pax Christi International. Et ce n'est pas une question que j'ai, c'est juste pour féliciter tous ceux qui ont présenté. Vraiment, toutes les présentations ont été présentées de façon simple, compréhensible, mais très enrichissante. Donc, merci beaucoup et pour toutes les informations partagées. Et ce que je vais souhaiter de Pax Christi International, c'est que les actions soient encore étendues vers l'Afrique de l'Ouest, dont fait partie le Togo. Parce que là aussi, il y a beaucoup de défis et beaucoup d'enjeux concernant la paix, concernant l'éducation, concernant la non-violence qu'il faudrait relever. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Pascal. It's really good to hear that this presentation has been really good for you and very clear. And thank you also for your suggestion for Pax Christi International to focus more on the Africa East, I believe it's in English. So I invite now one of the UN representatives maybe to react on that. Like, what are the opportunities for UN advocacy on the African region, actually? Maybe Mary wants to react, or Marie, or somebody else.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Akuti. It's very nice to meet you, and thank you for participating today, and thank you for your active engagement in this conversation. There are a number of opportunities to engage at the United Nations. We are a member of the what they call the NGO Working Group on the Security Council. So when there are agenda items on the Security Council docket that involve nations in West Africa, we could certainly alert you to that fact. The problem with the Security Council is that often matters are not placed on the docket unless there's an active conflict between two nations. So for example, we periodically get inquiries about election fraud or other things, but we don't have opportunities to address those directly. We can ask questions of the Security Council members if it involves an active territorial war or a national war. So with respect to just general peacekeeping, peace building, we will look for opportunities. And if you send me your email, if you'll send that to Alice, I will keep my ears open and I will ask our team to do the same. So if there are matters that come to our attention regarding West Africa issues, we can notify you. We're always in a position here in New York to take to missions, for example, the Togo mission, a letter from your community. If there's a particular issue you'd like to raise, we would be happy to walk it over and have a brief conversation and then report back to you as to what we've done. We would be happy to do that. But let's explore ways that we can work together. There are all kinds of opportunities, and I very much welcome your involvement, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. So I see we have another person wanting to take the floor, Meshach. Hello. I don't think we hear you. It might be that you're muted.
Allô?
Yeah, you're coming through.
C'est Meshach.
Bonjour. Donc, vous pouvez répondre, vous avez une question.
Merci beaucoup pour le retard de vous rejoindre. C'est une question.
Allez-y.
Oui, j'ai cherché juste à demander, est-ce possible encore que Pax Christi puisse reprendre sa force que nous, on a pu bénéficier dans la région des Grands Lacs, parce que ces derniers temps, les appuis de Pax Christi connaissent un petit problème d'appui financier, comme ça a été depuis le début. Je ne sais pas, est-ce que cela pourra encore être possible pendant cette période difficile de pandémie, de COVID-19, d'Ebola dans notre région? Voilà un peu ma question. Est-ce encore possible que Pax Christi puisse activer sa présence au milieu de nous dans la région des Grands Lacs? Moi, je vous parle de Goma, à l'est de la RDC.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you're asking if Pax Christi International can even have a stronger presence in the Great Lakes. We currently already have a project there that our regional coordinator, Dieudonné, is leading on nonviolence.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I think he will take note of that. But as the purpose of this meeting is especially to talk about UN advocacy, yeah, that's something maybe to address with him.
Auprès des Nations Unies, la question que j'avais posé ma question quand j'avais complété le formulaire, mais je ne sais pas si cette question a été un peu soulevée par rapport à la situation de la République démocratique du Congo, où les Nations Unies semblent un peu relâcher certaines choses, surtout les choses qui concernent les actions concrètes. Donc, à notre avis, nous avons trouvé que les Nations Unies attaquent souvent les conséquences, mais ne s'attaquent pas directement aux causes. Et voilà pourquoi un peu la guerre persiste depuis plus de déjà presque 3 décennies. Il n'y a pas de changement. Mais si les Nations Unies pourraient développer des mécanismes de s'attaquer aux causes directes, aux causes profondes des conflits, peut-être il y aurait déjà des changements. Voilà un peu ce qui était notre préoccupation par rapport à nos représentants auprès des Nations Unies.
Oui. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. So maybe Marie, would you like to react on the role that the UN could have regarding the Great Lakes and the stronger role they can have?
Well, I think that the question of addressing root causes is always fundamental. And I think that often the possibilities that the UN representatives of Pax Christi are able to where they're able to make a contribution is in to bring together the experience of people working at a grassroots, at a base level, who understand what the root causes are, to bring them into dialogue with decision makers at the United Nations in different parts of the system. So absolutely, your question is fundamental. It is a long process trying to move a big institution, but bringing your experience from local communities into the conversation at the United Nations is a fundamental part of that.
Thank you very much, Marie. So now we can take another question. If you would like to ask a question, please let us know through the chat, or you can raise your hand.
Godfried's hand is raised.
Please go ahead, Godfried.
Yeah, merci beaucoup pour la parole. Je voudrais profiter de cette réunion pour exprimer une préoccupation concernant le terrorisme en Afrique, au Niger, au Mozambique, à l'est de la République démocratique du Congo, nous prive de la paix. J'aurais voulu que Pax Christi International intègre la lutte contre ce terrorisme en Afrique dans son agenda de plaidoyer auprès des Nations Unies. Chercher un peu les causes profondes de ce qui se passe au Niger actuellement, de ce qui se passe au Mozambique, de ce qui se passe à l'est de la République démocratique du Congo. Une autre préoccupation, c'est par rapport aux migrations clandestines de l'Afrique vers l'Europe. Parce que Christ pourrait peut-être étudier, comme on vient de le dire, étudier les causes qui font que des jeunes femmes et hommes quittent leur pays natal pour risquer la vie dans la mer Méditerranée. Je crois que si Pax Christi pourrait mettre ça à son agenda avec d'autres acteurs, un jour on peut arriver à une solution durable de limiter ou d'éliminer cette migration de l'Afrique vers l'Europe et diminuer les taux de mortalité dus au terrorisme en Afrique. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. Your suggestions are well noted and heard here by the UN representatives. It's very important for us to know what your concerns are in the African region. So now we will move to Marjen, who also raised his hands. We cannot hear you.
I think that was Godfried, but I don't know if he's raised his hand again.
Okay, so then Alfonso Sardi.
Yes, hello, good afternoon to everyone from Strasbourg. And congratulations for this very helpful and interesting exchange. I have a small question to Ghislain concerning the possible coordination, if any, with other international Catholic NGOs represented to the UNESCO. We have a similar body here in Strasbourg as regards the Council of Europe, and it helps a lot. So I would like to know whether such an experience has been tried also in Paris, if it is feasible or impossible or unnecessary. Thank you.
Alors, merci Alfonso pour ta question. Alors c'est justement on a déjà commencé une coopération avec notamment New Humanity de Chantal Grévin. Hein, on a commencé un projet ensemble. Et sinon, le but avec la venue de Michel Cala, c'est justement de développer ce réseau avec des ONG catholiques. Il y a aussi le CCIC qui travaille beaucoup pour l'UNESCO. Donc, développer ce réseau de coopération, peut-être s'inspirer de ce que vous faites à Strasbourg, enfin, que tu m'en parles un peu plus. Mais c'est ça aussi le but de la coopération avec Michel Cala. Voilà.
Thank you very much, Gisela. So we still have time for a few questions, and we will now continue to Alois.
I'm happy to participate in this workshop. Yes, I can speak in English and in French also. Let me turn in French. Je suis le directeur de programme de la Commission épiscopale Justice et Paix du Burundi, membre de Pax Christi. Nous mettons en œuvre le projet de formation des jeunes sur la non-violence active. Nous sommes en collaboration avec Dieudonné, à partir de Bruxelles. Le Burundi étant un pays qui vient de sortir d'un conflit de guerre, nous constatons que les jeunes sont facilement manipulables parce qu'ils ne sont pas à mesure de résister par manque de moyens financiers, manque d'emploi. J'aimerais poser la question à Guylain, si nous pouvons être connectés à l'UNESCO et être financés dans des projets d'autonomisation des jeunes, notamment pour les supports de plans ou même des compétences entrepreneuriales qui pourraient, à côté de la formation sur la non-violence active, produire quelque chose d'autonomisation de ces jeunes pour pouvoir œuvrer pour la paix et résister aux sollicitations des politiciens. Je vous remercie.
Alors, pour essayer de répondre, il faut savoir que l'UNESCO, premièrement, a est en tension financière actuellement. Donc, il y a les États-Unis qui s'étaient retirés de l'UNESCO, notamment Israël aussi. Et donc, ça va revenir avec Biden. Et sinon, pour le projet ça peut être plutôt effectivement à travers des ONG qui s'investissent sur le terrain, comme ça a été fait dans la région des Grands Lacs, que l'UNESCO peut participer à des financements de travail sur la non-violence ou de travail sur l'entrepreneuriat individuel des entreprises, sur les petits entrepreneuriats. Voilà. Mais effectivement, il faut monter des projets comme le fait Pax Christi et pour essayer d'être financé. Mais les financements par l'UNESCO, ce n'est peut-être pas la meilleure voie pour l'instant. Chantal Grévin va intervenir, elle pourrait effectivement en dire plus de New Humanity.
Bonjour à tous, merci de m'avoir invité à votre réunion qui est très intéressante. Je voulais répondre en ce qui concerne les questions concernant l'Afrique et les migrations. Notre ONG, à partir de quelques jeunes de plusieurs pays d'Afrique de l'Est, ont constitué un groupe pour former les jeunes justement de manière à éviter ces raisons. Ils ont identifié les raisons pour lesquelles les jeunes souhaitent quitter l'Afrique et ils ont cherché à répondre à ces causes en faisant une formation et un accompagnement pour les jeunes qui sont à l'université, avec des groupes et un réseau qui se constituent. Donc, je me disais que vous pourriez peut-être vous relier, ceux qui sont en Afrique, à ce projet qui est d'ailleurs soutenu aussi financièrement par l'UNESCO à travers le programme de participation qui existe. Ce n'est pas une grosse allocation, mais c'est important que l'UNESCO s'engage sur ce genre de projet. Donc, je pense que vous pouvez, ce projet s'appelle Together for a New Africa. Donc, vous pouvez le voir soit sur notre site de New Humanity, soit directement Together for a New Africa. Et vous aurez tous les détails. C'est une manière de coopérer.
Merci beaucoup, Chantal.
Voilà.
Merci beaucoup, Chantal.
Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup, Chantal. Tu peux mettre dans le chat. Je demande à Chantal de mettre dans le chat le site de leur organisation. New Humanity, comme ça.
Oui, d'accord. Oui.
Yes, please, let's create some synergies in the chat. That would be really great. So now we will continue with the next question from Sister Pax from Environment and Human Rights in Duma. And she's asking Gisela that she thinks that he mentioned environment as a concern that he's focusing on. If so, could you please elaborate?
Alors, il y a eu effectivement des conférences sur les sciences liées à l'environnement à l'UNESCO. Ça fait partie effectivement des thèmes qui peuvent être abordés lors de conférences. Il faut qu'on travaille dessus, nous les ONG, sur faire une conférence internationale qui pourrait porter sur ce thème. Ça fait partie des domaines qu'on pourrait explorer dans les prochaines sessions du comité ONG UNESCO. Il faut qu'on leur propose ce thème qui est d'actualité, effectivement, qui est au centre de ce qui nous intéresse maintenant.
Thank you so much, Ghislain. So now Mary Yelanek would like to take the floor. Mary Yelanek, you would like to take the floor?
I'm trying to unmute. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to respond very briefly to some of the earlier questions that I'm not sure we gave enough response to, and they're very serious questions. The questions about Congo and Niger and Mozambique and Burundi. These are issues that are on the agenda of the Security Council, but they're also discussed very much at the United Nations. And you should know that at Pax Christi, we understand that you have to get to the root causes before violence can be addressed, that violence and young people deciding to take up arms is often an act of desperation because there are no alternatives. And what has happened to those countries? Extractivism, something we focus on, the plundering of raw materials from those countries, but without compensation, leaving very little for people there. The climate crisis, it's other countries that have caused the climate crisis, which have led to farms not being able to be worked any longer. In Peru, the water being contaminated with arsenic because of the mining there. It is outside countries that have destroyed these countries, really. The legacy of colonialism, the arms trade. The arms trade is a big concern of Pax Christi. And so, yes, we're very aware of root causes being the key. One thing we do, I wish we had hundreds of people at the United Nations. People at the United Nations are aware of these problems. The Security Council members, for the most part, are. But they tend to rely and fall back on old solutions. For example, they send in soldiers. One of the things that we're espousing now is something called unarmed civilian protection. There's a lot of literature suggesting that when you send in guns, it only enhances the opportunity for others to justify their own use of weapons. So there are different paradigms that we're trying to advocate for at the United Nations from the heart of nonviolence, from the heart of respect for people. Understand that we all have the same needs and wants. We all need security, which means food, which means a place to sleep at night, which means not having people running around with guns, which means not having other countries come in and extract our resources. So we're very, very conscious of that. And we're few in number. We need to work together to increase this awareness. I will be very mindful now because there are a lot of meetings at the United Nations that address these issues. Send me your emails and I will make sure you are on those lists so that your voices are heard at these meetings. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we will go to Emmanuel Ira.
All right, thank you very much. I have just one question. I'm Emmanuel Ira calling from South Sudan in Juba. Thank you very much for this forum. Thank you very much for all the presentation. My quick question has been touched by Mary, but I wanted to ask the question because we are looking at treaties that are dealing with the nukes. And the biggest problem, especially in Africa, is because of the proliferation of small arms. This is the biggest challenge in Africa. Then, if that is the case, are we seeing in future a treaty, if possible, to deal with the small arms? Because I think if we don't have small arms in Africa, then we don't have all these conflicts that are very common in Africa. So this is do we see this in future? Not now, of course, but do we see such a treaty in future so that we get rid of the most of the conflicts in Africa? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I will ask Mary to react, but then also Jonathan Fredericks, because actually he knows a lot about weapons treaty. So Mary, if you want, you can go first.
Thank you for that question. Yes, this is a very big issue at the United Nations, and there are a lot of people working on specifically this issue. So thank you for raising it, and I'll move to Jonathan.
Yes, thank you also for that comment. The most important thing that's actually happened is the arms trade treaty, which is really based on the fact of all the hundreds of millions of small arms and light weapons, which, as you say, are the weapons of real destruction in Africa at the present time. The arms trade treaty needs representation from civil society, especially from people, also including people of faith. And we have the meetings here in Geneva. I've been to many of them, and we could go back to those meetings with participation from your side, because the voices have to be heard. The treaty is an excellent treaty, but it's only as good as the implementation. I don't think it's realistic to think that all of those weapons will be banned. It's just, the world is too big and too complicated for that to happen. But we all know that we can make a difference on better policies for using them. And then also the powerful witness of nonviolence and peace building, which takes away the reason behind the use of the weapons. If I could say one other thing, I'm totally aware, I've been to Africa many, many times. I feel very at home there. I grew up in a place like Africa. I'm totally aware that nuclear weapons are on another planet for most people in the world. And there's only a relevance that you've done what you should have done by making your continent nuclear weapon free. And that needs to be protected and held up as a model. But if you were to, for example, participate in the small step of encouraging your government to sign the treaty, I went through the countries that have talked here, and some of you have signed, but nobody has ratified as far as I can tell. This is, it's like, they'll be surprised to hear that you care and that their country can make a difference, because I said in my talk, majorities matter. And for majorities to matter, they need to speak up and need to make their voices felt and heard for common sense. So you may be more worried about other issues, but we can support you to go to your government. And if you go on this issue, you get your foot in the door for other issues, and you show your broad concern for issues about peace and security in Africa, but also at a global level. And you help Africa to understand that it is the critical continent for setting the direction into the future in terms of armed violence. So I hope that that's somehow relevant, and I really appreciate the questions, and be very happy to be in touch with you by email.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. So it has been a very lively discussion, and we heard from many places around the world what your questions were, your concerns, and the UN representatives have listened very carefully to all of that. So let me thank you very much, but also tell you that after the event, we will send you the recording of the event, also presentations, and you can also be further in touch with me if you want to be in contact with one or more UN representatives, because I saw some questions on that in the chat. And then before we end, I would like us to make a group picture for social media. So if you would agree to that, please keep your cameras on or switch them on if they're currently off. And we will make a nice group picture.
Yes, we agree.
We are now waiting for my colleague Beth to nicely put all the cameras on the screen.
that's a selection that we do, but I have taken 2 screenshots to capture everyone's face.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, everybody. It has been a great pleasure, and let's continue to be in contact.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Au revoir.
Thank you very
Merci
much.
beaucoup.
Au revoir.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Merci.
Bye.
Au revoir.
Merci.
Bye bye.
Merci
Bon
encore,
week-end.
Dieudonné, de te revoir.
Bon week-end.
Merci.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Ça fait longtemps avec les confinements, c'est pas facile.
Bon, ça va, on reste en contact. Merci tout le monde.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Merci à tout le monde.
Et Dieudonné, je n'ai pas vu Dieudonné.
Je suis là.
Il est toujours là.
Oh, nice to meet you. Bonjour Dieudonné.
Bonjour, bonjour.
Bonjour, bonjour. On se parle, mais on ne s'est jamais vu. Allez, merci beaucoup.
Allô Jean-Baptiste, merci beaucoup d'être là.
Jean-Baptiste.
Bye. Bye, Bambuyu. Nice to
Bye.
meet you.
Bye.
Bye,
Yes.
Bambuyu.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you. It was great. Thank you, Alice.